Hey everybody, welcome. This session this week, we're going to be doing something a little bit different. I'm going to be speaking as directly as I can to my former self, really dealing with heavy anxiety, very substantial depression, even suicidal depression. And I decided I wanted to do this because I wanted to really serve you guys in a little bit of a different way. And chances are you're here, you're a part of the community, you're tuning into these lessons because you are struggling yourself with substantial anxiety and or depression or a different mental health complicated issue. And I want to make sure that we get you as clear cut information as you can to actually make a change. And what I was thinking is that, this year marks 15 years that I've been free from anxiety and depression. I'm not perfect. I've had moments of ups and downs. I've had emotionally challenging times since then. But since I was hospitalized and put on medication and put into therapy and dealing with my whole major mental health issues in my teens, and then I learned how to really overcome it and master it, I've really truly been free from both anxiety and depression for over 15 years this year. And so I certainly don't think I know everything, and I'm not even saying that, what has worked for me is absolutely going to work for you. But what I wanted to do is just have a little mental conversation with myself from back then. And I was thinking, what are the things that I would really desperately want to have known that I know now, not only having, overcome my own anxiety and depression, but now my team and I are closing in on 600 clients that we've helped either dramatically reduce their own anxiety or depression or even overcome it. So, what are some things that I want to do? So, these are in no particular order, and I'm sure I'll be going off script a little bit, but I just kind of imagine if I'm sitting there talking to myself from, way back when, a little context, I guess I should add, is what got me to that point. Just to be clear, my relationship with my family is great. I love my parents. I love my family. We've got a great relationship. My childhood was a little rocky, and now I've got a lot more perspective on it. I can see quite clearly that it was not nearly as bad as many others. But my parents were going through a really rough time in my childhood. My mother and my stepfather, primarily, they had some relationship issues. My stepfather's had some mental health challenges his whole life, some emotional instability, and home life was definitely not great, to just kind of put it very simply. And there was a lot of fighting, a lot of arguing, a lot of turmoil in our house. And that was a big part of what created a lot of emotional instability for me in my teens. And so for me, I started to develop some complexes. So I started to, first of all, develop a lot of fear of my stepfather and fear of people in general, really. My stepfather's never hurt me or harmed me or even threatened me physically, but he's a very kind of large, dominating man. And I was always scared of him because he'd have these big, angry outbursts. And for me, though, I started to develop huge anxiety that something bad was going to happen, either to myself, to my mother, to something along those lines. And then I also developed a lot of anxiety around trying to please my parents, especially. And I developed a lot of insecurities and self esteem issues that affected my relationships at school, with girlfriends at school, and things of that nature. So I was about as insecure and as anxious of a kid as you can get, right? I would walk into any room with my tail tucked between my legs. I automatically assumed people had a bad opinion of me, whether it be teachers or students or friends. I frequently didn't believe in myself at all. I thought I was going to fail at just about everything. There was pretty much no confidence that I had. I had a consistent slew of intrusive thoughts running through my mind every day about what type of bad situation was going to be happening at home later that night. I kept imagining the next several years, of high school playing out where it was just going to be very difficult and pretty much impossible for me to get through that. And then on top of that, I had some issues in the sense that I had a girlfriend that I thought I was going to spend the rest of my life with, and we ended up breaking up, and she got with who I thought was going to be my best friend. And looking back on it, it all seems kind of silly now, right? But when you're in the middle of it, it feels like the entire world is ending. And I think that that's one of the first things that I would say to myself if I were speaking to myself in the middle of that really anxious, depressed period, is that sometimes we get too zoomed in to a particular chapter of life. So I call this concept zooming in and zooming out. So sometimes depression occurs or anxiety occurs because we're too zoomed in. So that means that the pain that we're experiencing in this current chapter of our life is the only thing that we're focused on. It's the only thing that we're present to. It's the only thing that we're kind of staring at. And when you only fixate on the pain of what you've been going through in the recent past, your mind starts to distort reality and to think that this is how the entire reality, the entire rest of your life is going to be, which becomes really problematic. And so sometimes when you're in the middle of a painful period, you have to be able to zoom out. You have to be able to forecast into the future how things would be different or how they might change. And then sometimes also we zoom out far too much. Like I just was speaking with a man recently who's deeply depressed over the fact that he got a divorce over 20 years ago, right? And he keeps evaluating his life in the context of a decision he made over 20 years ago. So what he would do much better to do would be to zoom in on the day-to-day, moment-by-moment experience of his life and to take back control over that moment-by-moment experience. So I was just going through a period where I had tons of intrusive thoughts, lots of anxiety, didn't believe in myself, horrible self-esteem. I was not sleeping well. I did start using some drugs and alcohol at a young age to try to numb myself. And then I developed this really substantial depression that then resulted in suicidal ideation and then a suicide plan that thankfully was interrupted. And by the time my suicide plan was interrupted, I was like fully convinced, like I'm ending my life, it's over, there's no way I'm going to, proceed. There's just no way for me to make that happen. And I was still hell-bent on that, even though my family found out about my plan. They put me in the hospital. I was hospitalized for about 2 weeks, got onto medication, got into therapy, and then I was in therapy and on medication for the better part of about 1.5 years, trying to get things under control, trying to improve. And nothing was really working substantially well for me for a long period of time. So there was still a period where it was pretty bleak. And there was a period where I was not really sure that I was going to get the mental health that I really wanted. And I thought, okay, well, this is just how it's going to be forever. And so there's a series of pieces of advice that I want to give to my former self. And if you can empathize at all with what I'm talking about, then hopefully some of this will be helpful to you as well. So the very first piece of advice is, Ty, you're too zoomed in. Moment by moment, you're too zoomed in on this particular chapter of your life. And the reason that the experience that you're in right now feels so inescapably painful is just because, in a way, it's all you've ever known. All you've ever known is this sort of turbulent, difficult home life. And so you don't know what it feels like yet to be 25, to be 30, right? To grow up. But you will, and it will be occurring, and there will be a time when you're looking back on this and you'll realize that what you're going through right now is actually just a small chapter in the overall story. It's not the whole story. And I think with this piece of advice, I think that, in an ideal world, if I could actually give this to my younger self, hopefully my younger self would actually believe it. But I think that people say this type of thing to people who are dealing with anxiety and depression, and we tend to brush it off. If you guys can relate to that, let me know in the comments. But I know for me, when I was going through anxiety and depression, people kept telling me, oh, it'll get better, it'll change, everything will be different. And I kept saying, yeah, you just don't understand. And the thing I wanted people to understand was that my mind was so fixated on the pain of the present that I wasn't really able to contemplate a future. And I think that's what people who say, oh, hey, just cheer up, it's all good, think about the future, it'll all be over soon. Those people don't really understand that when you're dealing with anxiety and depression, your mind is involuntarily kind of making you stare at the painful stuff, right? And that's the thing that they don't understand. But in the same way, there's something that people who are going through the anxiety and the depression don't understand, which is that you can train the brain to focus on things differently. So even though your mind has an automatic propensity to focus on what is painful, that doesn't mean that you're destined to only feel pain. And that's the piece of advice that I would really want to make sure that my former self got. Because it's not as easy as just saying, hey, be positive, look on the bright side, think about everything you've got to be grateful for, focus on your future. The reason why those things piss off people who've got anxiety and depression is because we go, you don't understand. I try to think about my future going well, and then my mind immediately focuses on my future going badly. Or I try to think about what I'm grateful for, but then my mind only focuses on what I hate about myself, right? Or whatever it is. And so what we're trying to get people to understand is like our mind is working against us, right? But on the flip side, the people who are giving that advice are in a way correct. It's just that they're incorrect about how easy it is. It's not as easy as like flipping a light switch, but what I believe it is it's a dimmer switch. And what I mean by that is you can increase the percentage of time that your mind is actually focused on something that empowers you and makes you feel happy and grateful and excited and content. It's not to say like, hey, just be positive today, right now, okay? It's not as easy as that. But what it is we can increase the percentage of time that we're focused on gratitude. We can increase the propensity of our mind to stay positive and stay directed on positivity. And that's the thing I didn't understand back then. I thought it was binary. I thought it was all or nothing. And I was only aware of the fact that my mind was working against me. So I concluded falsely that my mind is just going to work against me forever, which is just not the truth, obviously. The second piece of advice that I really would want to give to my former self is, yes, Ty, there are plenty of things around you that you cannot control that are going to affect you, but those things will affect you much more so if you focus on them disproportionately compared to what is in your control about your situation. And this will be a constant in your life, that there are going to be things that affect you that are outside of your control. By focusing on what you can't control and wishing for those things to be different, you make yourself believe you are much more powerless to improve your life than you actually are. And you create blind spots to all of the things that are within your control to improve your quality of life. You create a sort of tunnel vision that keeps you from seeing all of the options that you have to enjoy and improve your life. So if you can learn to train yourself to change your focus onto what you can control, what you can enjoy, and what you can improve, then these items will become far more evident for you. So some of you who have been in our community before have maybe seen me do this exercise before, but if not, this is a really good one to go through. So what I'll usually do with a brand new client is I'll say, hey, in the room that you're in, and in fact, if you're listening to this right now, go ahead and do this. In the room that you're in, try to look for every piece of the color red you can see. Try to find every single piece of red that you can find, okay? Like my little friend here, okay? Try to find every single piece of red. Go ahead, actually do this. Search in your room, okay? And then close your eyes. And with your eyes closed, try to remember what you saw that was blue. And you'll find that that is difficult to do. But you'll find that if you ask yourself, wait a minute, where was the red? Your mind is easily able to remember the red. And so what I've learned in mental health coaching is that our mind becomes trained to delete certain things out of our field of awareness and to magnify other things in our field of awareness. And what I didn't realize my mind was doing in my teens was I was completely focused on A, what I cannot control, B, how I'm afraid things would go in the future, C, what I disliked about myself, and D, what I disliked about everybody else. And what that caused me to do was to, in effect, essentially look for red. I was essentially constantly scanning for the color red, as a metaphor, scanning for those things I just said. And by doing that, I deleted out the blue, right? But as you saw with the color example, if you start to look for blue, go ahead and look for the color blue now. Go inside of your room, go ahead and look for blue. You'll actually see quite a bit of blue. But when you were looking just for red, you didn't see the blue. You created a sort of hypnotic color blindness, if you will. And so the important thing I'm trying to say here is that it's not that there is nothing to be grateful for. It is that your mind has a habit of automatically screening out everything that there is to be grateful for. It's not that there are not things that are in your control to improve your life. It's that your mind probably has a tendency to screen out all of the things that are inside of your control that you could do. It's not that, for example, you don't have the ability to connect with and feel in love with your partner. It's that you may have developed a mental habit of deleting out and screening out all the things that you like about your partner. So our mind is in this constant process of training itself on what to magnify and what to delete. And I didn't realize that at the time. All you know when you're in the middle of it is that all the bad shit is magnified and it feels like it's the only thing you can focus on. But what you forget is that there's a totally other color in the room right under your nose that you can train yourself to seek out and find and see and experience. When all you know is that you're focused on how you're afraid the future is going to be, you forget that you can get your mind to focus on a version of the future going well. When all you know is that you're focused on what you hate about yourself, you forget that there are actually things that you do like about yourself, but you have to get your mind to actively seek those things out. And you have to train your mind to answer a new question, such as, what do I like about myself? And so this is one of the most powerful things that I've learned since that time, is that in a way we feel anxiety and we feel depression because our mind has just become so accustomed to looking for red. And we haven't trained our mind to look for blue, but the blue is right there under our noses. And now, thankfully, I live a life where I see blue 80% of the time, where the blue is a metaphor for what I enjoy, what I'm grateful for, what I'm excited about, how I want the future to go, what I do like about the people around me. My mind naturally automatically goes to those things now, but it only does so because I trained it to do so. And so I would really want to share that with my previous self and help him understand that you can make a change in what your mind consistently focuses on. It can be trained. The third piece of advice I'd want to give my former self, and I'd really want to give him a big hug, and tell him this very warmly, and that is that your self-worth is not contingent on how other people behave or how other people treat you. Your self-worth is not contingent on how others treat you. So even though other people around you might be treating you like a piece of shit, you are not a piece of shit. And I probably would have said that to my former self about 100 times in a row to make sure that it really sunk in. And I think a lot of you guys can relate to this because many of you guys, especially if you've had anxiety or depression for a long time, since like childhood, there's a decent chance that you may have had somebody in your life that put a suggestion in your mind that you were less than, either directly or indirectly. Directly in the sense of maybe they told you you were less than, indirectly in the sense that maybe they consistently gave you signals that what you were doing was not enough. And in either one of those cases, you may have started to adopt a narrative that you're not enough and that there's some set of expectations that you have to live up to and prove in order to validate your self-worth. And that could be that you're trying to be a perfectionist, that you're trying to please everybody, you're trying to solve everybody's problems, you're trying to be the fixer and the improver of everything, you're trying to be the big, strong person that is reliable for everybody. There's different roles that we convince ourselves that we have to play based off of the signals that we get, especially from our parents and our home life, of who we think we can be and who we can't be. So if you get punished for being a certain way, your brain goes, oh, I can't be like that. And then if you get some type of pleasure, like attention or validation or love from your parents when you're being a particular way, you start to create a self-concept of who you think you have to be. So, for example, if you tried your damnedest, but it never seemed to be good enough for your parents, you may have created a mental model for yourself that you have to be perfect. And you're still trying to live into that role as an adult, and it's not working out for you. Maybe what signals you got from your parents was that they only approved of you when you were achieving things and being successful. And so you developed this idea that you really have to achieve and succeed and go to greater and greater heights. And whatever it is for you, you may be trying to prove something to people in order for you to feel that you are good enough. And what I would really spend as much time as I could talking to my former self to help him understand is that your self-worth is not dependent on the moods of your parents. Your self-worth is not contingent on whether people around you are pleased. Your self-worth is not contingent on whether you are able to effectively solve other people's problems. Your self-worth is not contingent on how much you achieve. It's not contingent on whether you make mistakes or not. Your self-worth is ineffable. Your self-worth is simply no longer up for negotiation. You get to be the one that decides that your self-worth is no longer up for negotiation, that it's not going to be something that you question. It's going to be something that you really, truly validate consistently again and again. And that would be the thing I would spend a lot of time helping him understand, because in my younger years, and honestly even a little bit later on in life too, but I really developed this propensity to try to solve everybody's problems and to try to please everybody, which is probably why I'm in the career path that I'm in. is wanting to solve everybody's problems. And I used to get all of my sense of self-worth from trying to fix everything. The problem is that role is unsustainable, and it causes you to feel anxiety and depression whenever you can't fix something, or when there's something that's outside of your control. Like, for example, when my wife got breast cancer a few years ago, that was something I couldn't fix and I couldn't control, but I really was subconsciously trying to do so. So that was a really difficult period for me emotionally. So I would really want him to understand that because you have, because you exist, you have a right to be. You know, if you're on this planet and you're existing and you're breathing, you have a right to be. Your self-worth is not up for negotiation. And the mental exercise that I usually impart to people, that I would say to my former self to really help him get this and help his self-esteem, is I would say, look, think about a young child, like a young baby, right? And I think about my younger sister at that time. When I was in my teens, I had a baby sister. And I would say, look, does your baby sister have to be a particular way in order for you to be loving to her? Do you only love her when she's being quiet and she's not crying and fussing? Do you only love her when she eats her food or doesn't eat her food? And I would at that time have said, no, of course not. I love her no matter what. And I would say, great, then you need to extend, you need to practice and cultivate extending that same level of unconditional love to yourself as you would a child. And I offer that same question to a lot of my clients who are parents, who would never, ever, ever dream of withholding love from their children, but they do actively withhold love from themselves every day, all day. And they would never put a set of expectations on their children and withhold love until those expectations are met, yet they are doing that very thing to themselves. And so the act of extending self-love is not a little like bumper sticker, like woo-woo concept. It is a skill. It is a thing that you need to actively affirm. And for me, the belief system that has helped me make that happen is, I have decided basically that I'm no longer going to make my self-worth up for negotiation. I'm going to make sure that every single day, I don't have to meet any particular expectations. I don't have to abide by any roles. I don't have to try to please everybody. I don't have to solve everybody's problems, right? That as long as I'm doing my best and trying to serve other people, that's plenty good enough. And so if you can redefine what you believe is necessary for you to be validating of your own self-worth, your whole mental health will change. And that would be advice that I would have given to myself in my teens. The next thing I would have advised to myself is this, and that is that, the people around you who are throwing their own negative emotions at you are simply in pain in their own way. The people who are around you who are affecting your mental health because of their own mental and emotional patterns, what they are doing is they're just doing the best they can figure to do right now. And there will be a time in the future where you're going to accidentally harm other people that you love without intending to. And you will desperately hope that those people that you hurt will have enough grace to recognize that how you're acting in that moment is not necessarily a true representation of who you are underneath. So maybe give these people around you that are affecting you a little bit of grace. And one big belief that I would really tell my former self is that there are really only two types of communication that people are giving at any given time. One, they either are giving a loving response, or two, they are giving a cry for help. And what I didn't realize when I was in my teens was that my friends, my family, that all sorts of people are sort of fighting their own private war inside, and that they're all dealing with their own pains and their own hurts. And so a lot of the times what we do, at least what I did back in the past, is someone is responding to us. They're being angry, they're being dismissive, they're being, maybe even frankly abusive. And we take what they're saying as a reflection of who we are, when in actuality, it usually has nothing to do with who we are. Usually we are just the trigger for their pre-existing pain. And they're basically just kind of telling us through their actions, hey, I'm really in pain right now. I really, really need some help and I need some love, but I don't know how to express that to you. So I like to think of it as like they have a big, deep wound, and then we come around and just barely touch that wound. It's not like we're the ones that are responsible for causing that pain and that upset and that reactivity, but rather they have a pre-existing wound, right? And, again, if you think about what you would do with a child, if you had a child who reacted in a very knee-jerk reaction like that to you, you wouldn't get mad at the child. You would realize, like, hey, you're in pain, you're hurting, you don't really mean what you say right now. And that has been something that has really helped me, as now I can see the pain that those people were in, that were causing me pain back then. And so what I would encourage my former self to do is to really try to get myself into the shoes of the people I was resenting, and to make sure that I was having a very thorough appreciation for their background and their hurts and their traumas and the abuses they went through, and to recognize that they never really learned the mental and emotional tools of how to respond appropriately. And so they're just doing the best that they can in that moment. And that would be an important thing I would want to pass on to my former self. Okay, the next piece of advice I would want to give to my former self is that, hey, look, just because medication and therapy are not working for you does not mean that you are doomed to be anxious and depressed forever. And that was a big thing that I really needed to hear back then, but nobody was telling me, because I was really doing my full faith best effort to try to get results through therapy and medication, but it just was not working for me. And what I am so passionate about helping people understand today is that doesn't mean you're broken forever. It doesn't mean your brain is messed up forever. It doesn't mean you're destined to never feel joy or peace of mind ever again. It just means that there's a set of tools that you have not yet mastered. And that if you can stay hungry and stay committed for figuring out what those tools are, and you don't give up, then you're not going to be able to fail. You will be able to eventually get the mental health that you want. That's what I really truly believe in my bones, is no human being has to live with anxiety or depression forever. There is a set of lasting skills that can be used to get the results that you're after. But too often people conclude that they're just going to have to deal with anxiety or depression forever because therapy and medication is not working for them, and they think that those are their only options. And I certainly believed that back then, but that wasn't the truth. And that leads me to my next piece of advice. And this is really the thing that I would want to like sit myself down, grab myself by the shoulders, and like really make sure that this message is delivered, which is your brain is trainable. Your brain is trainable. That would be the big thing I would want my former self to understand. And I now know that beyond a shadow of a doubt, right? We can train how we think, how we feel, how we respond. And we can make it so that the automatic disposition we have in all three of those areas is positive. Doesn't mean we're ever going to be perfect, but we can absolutely train the nervous system to operate how we want it to operate, probably 80-90% of the time, depending on how committed you are and how effective the skills are that you have to make that happen. And that would be the thing I'd really want to impart, because I could have saved myself probably 2 years of time if I would have said, hey, dude, your brain is really, really trainable. I know you're feeling really anxious and really depressed and just, horrible right now, but you can train the brain to think and feel differently. You have the ability to make that happen. You need to stay hungry and stay looking for strategies and skills that will help you do that. If I would have gotten that message, I probably could have, increased my recovery window by a couple of years, and that would have been pretty powerful. The next piece of advice, I think this is a really big one, really, really big one actually. What I would really want to tell myself back then, if I could coach my former self, I would say, look, what you're missing right now is a vision of the future being how you want it to be. And that's what we need. We need to be fixated on the future that you want. And by the way, this is one of the things that actually started my anxiety and depression recovery, is I started to think about, graduation from high school and going to college and starting a career and, all the things that were going to be out in front of me and ahead of me. That made all of the difference. Just focusing on something desirable out in the future is very often the antidote to depression and to anxiety, because anxiety is nothing more than your nervous system anticipating the future is going to go badly in a way that you fear. And then depression is, in a way, nothing more than having like no vision of the future except a negative one. So if I could have sat down for, with my former self and take like 15, 20 minutes, what I would have done is I would have said, look, what do you really want to do, when you get out of high school? What do you want to do? Do you want to go to college? What kind of career would you want to have? Like, just anything, right? Let's just fixate on anything that we possibly can work towards that will improve your life. And I even had to start setting like micro goals too. like for my physical fitness and my grades and all sorts of things. But as soon as I started focusing each and every day on something I was looking forward to, it changed everything. That was really what started to unlock everything. But it was only by me relentlessly asking myself, what can I look forward to today? What can I look forward to today? What can I look forward to today? And breaking the pattern and the cycle my mind was so addicted to from before, which was what bad shit is going to occur today. All right, so I had to break that cycle. Okay, next piece of advice I would really give my former self is, this may be tough for you to believe, but it is the absolute truth. All of the pain that you are experiencing right now, you will one day be grateful for, because you will realize that it gave you the fuel and the desire to help others. And if you would have grown up in an environment where everything was perfect all the time, you would be worse off in the long run, because you would not have developed the emotional resources you are currently, even though it doesn't feel like it. And this is the God's honest truth. I really believe that if everything would have worked out perfectly for me back then, I would have about 1/10 of the amount of drive and desire and ambition as I have now. It was only through the process of going through the shit and then overcoming the shit that I went, holy cow, I need to help other people do this. And that's what's created an entire, career and a lifetime of being able to serve people and help them out. So that would have been one of the big things I would have wanted to impart to myself back then, as well, is that sometimes what you are being deprived of in the moment is the very thing that you ultimately are going to be grateful that you went without. In other words, sometimes you are deprived of what you want so that you can get what you really need. And that's exactly what happened for me. I was deprived of things like comfort and certainty and unconditional love and all of those things, that stability I was looking for. I did not have a very stable environment growing up. But that's good, because what that enabled me to do was to have a deep empathy for people in pain, to have a strong desire and an ambition and an urge to grow and build and expand my life and make things better. I also developed a lot of propensities that have helped me in the future. Like, for example, even my people-pleasing tendencies, that got me started on wanting to help solve people's problems. Now, initially, I was trying to solve people's problems to validate my own self-worth, so I'd beat myself up if I didn't solve their problem. But I probably wouldn't be coaching people. I probably wouldn't be helping people overcome their own anxiety and depression had I not initially gotten my self-worth tied up with the whole concept of I've got to help people. So I'm grateful for that. I'm really, truly grateful. I can look back on every single experience I had in my upbringing, and I'm truly, deeply grateful that it all occurred in the way that I wanted it to. I see some people are putting in questions, by the way. I'll get to questions. I'm almost done with the content, and then I'll answer questions. Final piece of advice that is coming to my mind right now, that I wrote down anyway, is this, and that is that everything changes and everything ends. And the delusion that we tell ourselves is that it won't change and it won't end, which makes us want to give up. And that's what I was believing back then. I was convincing myself this isn't going to change, this isn't going to end. And those two beliefs will cause you to be suicidal. Those two beliefs will cause you to feel overwhelmed, deeply anxious, deeply depressed, because we feel anxiety and depression in direct proportion to how few choices we convince ourselves that we have. And in that moment, in that time, I had total blindness and total tunnel vision to all of the choices that I had, both at the micro level and the macro level. The micro choices that I had, such as all of the things I could take control of in my daily life to improve my joy and improve my quality of life. And then the macro choices that I had in terms of all the things I was going to be able to do in my life later on. And now as an adult, it's like the freedom is totally there, because nobody gets to boss me and tell me what to do. I can do whatever the hell I want. So I've got total choices. And if you're an adult watching this, which you probably are, you have total choices too. There's nobody keeping you from doing what you want to do. You might have a story that's telling yourself that, but that's not necessarily true. So I thought I had zero choices back then, which is not true. And that's the big thing I would really want to help myself reclaim. And so that's really what I did too. It took me about 2 years, like I said, but I started to focus on all the things in my control, what I could do every day to make my life a little better, goals, setting very small, specific goals for myself, and working towards those. And then just doing everything in my power to improve my own quality of life. And by focusing on that, focusing on my zone of control, and focusing on a vision of the future going how I wanted it to go, and then relentlessly dedicating myself to pursuing all the answers I could find about what strategies and methods could help me overcome anxiety and depression. That's really the short version of what got me out of that really, really dark period. So anyway, hope some of this is helpful to you. I see a question from Eric. Eric says, what are the tools we can use to get results? Well, you know, Eric, obviously I don't want to, toot our own horn here, of course, but we have basically like a 90-day step-by-step process with every single, step and tool. It's a modified, refined version of what we do, what I did, that helped me get out of that really dark period. There are certain core things that everybody has to do in order to overcome anxiety and depression. It has to be customized a little bit for each person, but there is a common thread. There is a absolute framework and formula that works for everybody. We just have to customize it a little bit. And, basically what I just summarized a second ago would be kind of the short list. But for anybody who's interested, of course, if you want to utilize the process we teach our clients, just let us know in the comments if you want to apply for that. We can set up a quick 10-minute call and see if it's a good fit for you. So just put the word apply in the comments. Or if you're joining us on the podcast, you can go to mentalhealthcoaching.com and we can do a phone call with you, see if it's a good fit for you. Love the comments, guys. Love this. Hope this served you in some small way. Go ahead and let us know in the comments what would be the advice you would give to your former self if you have some. I think that would be helpful for us to see in the community. We can all support each other. Otherwise, I'll see you guys next week on our next live training. Take care for now. See ya.